Does God really exist, or is it all just coincidence? Let me tell you a story that might change the way you see life forever. It was a cold December evening in the bustling city of Karachi. The streets were wet from the afternoon rain, shimmering under the yellow streetlights. Cars honked impatiently, people hurried with umbrellas, and somewhere in the crowd, a young man named Zion walked with his head down, hands buried deep in his worn-out jacket pockets. Zion was 27, but life had aged him beyond his years. His eyes carried the weight of broken dreams. A year ago, he had lost his father to a heart attack. 6 months later, his mother fell gravely ill. The hospital bills devoured what little savings they had, and despite his endless prayers, she too passed away. Left alone, Zion dropped out of college to work odd jobs, but no matter how hard he tried, money slipped through his fingers like sand. Rent was due, his electricity was already cut off, and tonight, as he walked home, his stomach ached from skipping meals again. That night, sitting on the floor of his small rented room, Zion stared at the flickering candle beside him. He whispered into the emptiness, "God, if you're there, why is my life like this? I've done nothing but struggle. I've prayed, I've hoped, but you remain silent." Tears fell onto his hands. For the first time in his life, he felt anger toward God. Maybe he wasn't real. Maybe all those stories his parents told him about faith and miracles were just comforting lies. His phone buzzed, a text from his landlord. "If you can't pay rent by tomorrow, you need to leave." Zion closed his eyes. The world seemed cruel, empty. And in that emptiness, a thought came. What if I end it? Just stop fighting. The idea scared him, but it also felt like relief. The next morning, Zion walked aimlessly through the city, unable to face his landlord. He found himself near the M.A. Jinnah Road market, where street vendors shouted prices, and the smell of fresh samosas filled the air. There, on the corner, sat an old man selling hand-carved birds. They weren't impressive, just simple pieces of craft, but the man's wrinkled face carried a strange warmth. The old man looked up and smiled. "You look lost, son. Care to buy a bird?" Zion shook his head. "I don't have money." The old man studied him quietly, then picked up the smallest bird and said, "Take it. A gift." Zion frowned. "Why?" The man leaned closer. "Because sometimes the gift you need isn't money. It's a reminder." Without waiting for thanks, he turned to another customer. Zion, confused, put the wooden bird in his pocket and walked away. That evening, Zion sat in a park staring at the little wooden bird. On its wing was carved a single word: patience. He traced it with his finger, feeling something he couldn't explain. Just then, a young woman approached carrying a large bag of groceries. She tripped over a stone and everything scattered. Zion instinctively ran to help, gathering apples and bread from the ground. She smiled, embarrassed. "Thank you. You're a lifesaver. I bought too much for my grandmother and it's so heavy." They walked together toward her home. On the way, she asked about him. When he mentioned he was looking for work, her eyes lit up. "My uncle owns a small printing shop. He's been looking for someone. I can introduce you." 2 days later, Zion stood behind the counter of a dusty little printing shop. The pay wasn't much, but it was steady. For the first time in months, he felt a spark of stability. One afternoon, while sorting papers, he noticed a customer's order, a stack of flyers for a charity event at a local orphanage. Something inside him pulled, and he asked if he could visit. The orphanage smelled faintly of chalk and soap. Children's laughter echoed through the halls. Zion met a boy named Imran, 8 years old, thin, with big, curious eyes. He asked, "Do you believe in God?" Zion hesitated. I don't know anymore." The boy smiled gently. "I didn't either, until last year. I was so hungry one night and I prayed for food. The next morning, someone donated bread to the orphanage. It's not magic, but it was enough to remind me I wasn't alone. That night, Zion lay in bed thinking about Imran's words. Not magic, but enough to remind me I wasn't alone. Was the old man's wooden bird also such a reminder? Weeks passed. One evening, a heavy storm hit the city. Streets flooded and power lines fell. On his way home, Zion saw an old woman struggling to push her cart of vegetables through the rain. He hesitated. He was cold, drenched, and exhausted. But something about the wooden bird in his pocket made him step forward. He pushed the cart with her for nearly a kilometer until she reached shelter. The old woman pressed something into his hand, a small envelope. For your kindness. Inside was 3,000 rupees, enough to cover his rent and groceries for weeks. Zion stood frozen in the rain, staring at the sky. Is this you, God? Are you showing me something? Months later, Zion saved enough to rent a better place. He continued working at the print shop, but more importantly, he began volunteering at the orphanage every weekend. One day, he returned to Magina Road to find the old man who had given him the bird, but the stall was gone. He asked around. Nobody remembered seeing him. Was he real? Or was he an angel sent to plant a seed of faith? Zion never found out, but he kept the wooden bird on his desk, a daily reminder. Patience brings the gifts of God, often in ways we don't expect. Moral of the story is, God's gifts don't always come as miracles that change everything in an instant. Sometimes they come as small signs, a stranger's kindness, a sudden opportunity, a word carved on a wooden bird. If you stop looking for perfection and start noticing the little blessings, you realize you were never alone.
If this story touched your heart, share it with someone you love. Maybe it'll help them. And if you believe stories like these deserve to be heard, please like, comment, and subscribe to Life Lessons Library. Your one click keeps these stories alive.